Welcome back to Nature Documentary for Sleep. If you enjoy drifting off to real places, leave a comment and consider liking and subscribing. Tonight, you're stepping into Yellowstone's boiling springs, where the ground is thinner than it looks. It's early, the boardwalk is still empty, and you're here to check a temperature logger before the weather turns. The air smells like wet stone, with just enough sulfur to remind you this isn't a spa. Off the planks, the pale crust looks dry, solid, dependable, and your boot presses into it like warm foam. Under that skin is near boiling water, moving through vents and cracks that can shift overnight. One wrong step doesn't need drama. It only needs a few centimeters of brittle center above a hot channel. So, as you reach for that flagged sensor and hear tiny pops of gas escaping nearby, what fails first? The mineral crust, your balance, or your route back to the boardwalk? Your glove closes around the little stake, and the flag trembles like it is breathing. You lean down, and the air near the ground is warmer than the air at your face. That is the first lie this basin tells you, that heat rises cleanly and politely. Here it pools low, it clings, it drafts along the crust like an animal. You shift your weight just a fraction, and the surface gives again. Not a crack, not a collapse, just a soft sag that answers your boot. You look back to the boardwalk, and it is already farther than it felt. A thin ribbon of steam curls out of a hairline seam beside the flag. It was not there yesterday, because yesterday is not a stable reference point. You came out before tourist hours for a reason. Speed, quiet, and fewer questions. Now the basin pays you back with a question of its own. Do you take the safe route back, or do you grab the logger and cut across? You tell yourself it will be quick. You tell yourself you have done this a dozen times. You crouch, you unclip the temperature logger from its little anchor, and the plastic is warm. Not sun warm, not pocket warm, but warmed from below, like a mug set on a heater. The tiny display blinks through a film of condensation, and you wipe it with your thumb. The numbers do not matter yet, because your feet do. You straighten up, and the wind shifts. It brings a heavier sulfur note, like boiled eggs left too long. You glance toward the west, where the sky is turning a dull steel color. A storm is building early, the kind that makes the boardwalk slick and the radio fussy. You decide to cut back the fast way, upstream, along the crack you just saw. It feels logical, like following a handrail in the dark, and it feels safer than stepping out into the open crust again. You plant your boot near the seam, and you test the ground with a probe pole. The pole is just fiberglass and habit, but it keeps you honest. It meets resistance, then sinks an inch, then stops. That is not reassuring, but it is information. You move anyway, slow, keeping your weight centered, like you are on thin ice. The crack runs ahead of you, narrow as a cut in paper. Steam pulses from it in tiny breaths, and each breath carries a little hiss. The sound is quiet, but it has confidence. You follow it because it points somewhere, and because you need a line. A few steps in, your soles start to feel the heat. Not burning yet, but a steady warmth that climbs through rubber. It is the sensation of standing too close to a campfire, except the campfire is underground. You angle toward a patch of crust that looks older, chalky white, and dry. Old sinter, you tell yourself, built up from years of mineral-rich water cooling on the surface. It is like limestone, except it formed in a hurry, and it is full of holes. You step onto it, and the surface is crisp, almost glassy. It crunches faintly under your tread, like stale sugar. You pause, and the basin answers with another pop. Close this time. A bubble releases from a shallow pocket, and the crust around it trembles. You freeze. Then you shift back a half step because the instinct is older than training. The air in front of you fogs for a moment, and your glasses catch a film of moisture. You wipe them again, and your glove comes away damp. The crack you are following widens for a foot, then narrows. It looks like a zipper, half undone, showing the steam underneath. You can feel a faint vibration through the pole, a hum that is more felt than heard. That hum is not danger by itself. It is just movement. But movement here means the map is being edited while you read it. You choose a line that keeps you near a low ridge of mineral terrace. Terraces are comforting because they look like stairs, like something designed. They are not designed. They are deposits, the dried drips of hot water that has been working longer than you have. As you climb the terrace lip, you smell something sharper. Not sulfur now, but a clean mineral tang like wet concrete. Ahead, the runoff channel you crossed yesterday comes into view. Yesterday, it was ankle deep, gentle, almost pretty. This morning, it is louder. The channel is wider, and the water is moving faster, pushing little rafts of foam. Steam skims along its surface, and where it touches the air, it disappears. The sound is the problem. It is not a babble, it is a hissy, urgent rush, like a faucet turned too far. You stop because your fast route has just been cut. A new rill, a thin branch of near-boiling water, is peeling off the main channel. It slides across the crust like a living wire, glowing in the cold dawn. It is not deep, not dramatic. It is exactly ankle depth, which is a cruel height for a human body. It is deep enough to soak boots and hot enough to take skin with it. You look for the place you plan to cross. The edge is already undermined, the crust darkening, where the hot flow licks it. Erosion does not need a canyon to be serious. Here it just needs a minute and a steady pour. You tap your probe pole ahead, seeking a solid spot. The pole hits a patch that feels firm, and you lean in to test. It punches through with a sudden give, and a breath of steam pops up. It fogs your glasses completely, and for a second, you are blind. You pull the pole back, and the hole it made immediately fills with shimmering water. You take 2 steps back, heart thumping harder than it should at this hour. Your route is not gone yet, but it is changing faster than your decisions. You turn your head, looking for another crossing. The basin is painted in colors that feel impossible at dawn. Turquoise pools, orange rims, pale green slicks that look like spilled paint. You know the colors are microbes, heat-loving mats that live where plants would die. They are nature's warning labels, written in bright ink. You skirt them anyway, because you are trying to stay on the palest crust. Pale means cooler, you tell yourself. Pale means dry. Pale means safe. Those are 3 separate assumptions, and you cannot afford all of them. You choose a detour onto a broad sheet of bright white center. It looks thick, layered, like old plaster baked hard. You keep the pole in front of you, and you test every step. Tap, step, tap, step. The rhythm is calming until it is not. On the third tap, the pole goes through again, deeper this time. Steam rises, slow, and you smell something like hot pennies. Your stomach tightens, a small, involuntary knot. You backtrack, careful, placing your boots in the same impressions. But behind you, the hot rill is still moving. It is widening like it has all the time in the world. Because it does. You glance down at your handheld radio and you thumb the button. You call in, quiet, clipped, the way you were trained. Your voice sounds too loud in the open air. At first, there is nothing, just static and a distant squeal. Then, a voice breaks through, thin and strained. Hydrothermal disturbance. Stay on established routes. The words arrive like they are late to their own message. Then dead air as the signal drops behind a ridge of steam. You stare at the radio for a beat, as if looking harder will bring the signal back. The basin does not care about your reception. You swallow, and you make the first real decision of the morning. You stop trying to cross the runoff, and you climb toward higher ground. Higher ground here does not mean safe. It just means less water. You angle toward a slight rise, a brittle mineral terrace that looks like a dry spill. As you climb, you can hear vents ahead. Not roaring, not geysering, just constant hissing, like air escaping a tire. You tell yourself that vents mean openings, and openings mean less hidden channels. That is not always true. Sometimes vents mean pressure looking for new ways out, and you have already seen one new crack appear beside your flag. You keep moving anyway, because standing still is how cold and panic catch you. The terrace top is flatter than you expect, and it feels like standing on bone. Hard, smooth in places, sharp in others. Below, hot water flows in braided threads, weaving and unweaving their paths. It is mesmerizing in the way a campfire is mesmerizing. Beautiful and ready to hurt you if you get stupid. You look at a pool to your right, one you know from the map in your head. It should be calm, a blue eye with a steady overflow. This morning, it is churning. Convection overturns the surface like a pot left unattended. Bubbles rise in irregular throbs, not geyser bursts, more like a throat clearing. The pool belches, and each belch sends ripples to the edge. Those ripples lap against the crust, and the crust darkens as it warms. You do not like how active it looks. You do not like how close your detour has brought you to it. But the downwind side is the only side you can see clearly. Upwind, steam stacks up and erases the ground. You choose the downwind skirt, keeping the pool on your right and a low ridge on your left. You time your steps between gusts of steam that sweep across like curtains. When the steam clears, you move. When it thickens, you stop. It becomes a strange dance. The basin leading, you following. Your breath sounds loud inside your own head. In the clear moments, you see details you wish you did not. The center is pocked with tiny vents, pinholes that glisten. Some release nothing. Some release a faint shimmer of heat. Some spit a tiny bead of water as if testing the air. You keep your boots away from them, but there are too many to count. Your senses start to narrow. All you want is to get back to the boardwalk, to wood, to something built. The wind shifts again, and this time it hits you in the face. The air has a sharp bite, more than sulfur, more chemical. Hydrogen sulfide, your brain supplies, late and unhelpful. It is the smell of rotten eggs turned up, but the danger is not the smell. The danger is that it dulls you. It irritates eyes, tightens throat, makes you feel a little drunk in the worst way. Your eyes water and the world blurs at the edges. You cough once, then swallow it down, because coughing makes you inhale deeper. You pull your collar up, but cloth does not negotiate with gas. You keep moving because stopping in a bad plume is how you get stupid faster. Then you feel something else. A low tremor passes under your feet, a slow vibration like a distant truck. Except there are no trucks out here. Not at this hour, not in this basin. The tremor lasts 2 seconds, maybe 3. It is not an earthquake you would report. It is just enough to make the pool's surface shiver, and just enough to remind you that the plumbing is alive. You wait, holding your breath, listening. The hiss continues, uninterrupted, indifferent. No explosion, no dramatic geyser, just the same steady exhale. You tell yourself the tremor was normal. Yellowstone is always moving, always settling. You say it like a comfort, and it is not. You take another step, and your boot slides. The ground is slick in a patch you did not see. Algae and warm condensate like soap. Your foot skates forward. Your center of gravity follows, and you go down hard. Your knee hits first, then your palm, and the cold shock of impact is immediate. Pain blooms across your kneecap, sharp and bright. Your glove brushes a thin rivulet, clear water running down the terrace. It looks harmless, like melted snow. It is far hotter than it looks. Heat punches through the glove in an instant, and you jerk your hand back. The skin under the wet fabric stings, and you suck air through your teeth. Congratulations! You have discovered that water can be invisible and still be a weapon. You push yourself up. Slow, checking your palm, flexing fingers. No blister yet, just that lingering burn sting that promises more. Your knee is scraped, and the fabric of your pants is damp and gritty. You stand, and the pain changes your posture. A small limp sneaks in, and you hate it immediately. Limping changes how you step, and how you step changes whether you live. You take a moment to breathe, to clear your eyes. You look around, trying to reorient. Steam plumes rise in columns and sheets, drifting, revealing, hiding. The boardwalk is not visible from here. All you have is the sense of where it should be and the sound of water. You turn your head and you spot the flag again, farther than it should be. Not because it moved, but because you did. Your gear bag is somewhere behind you, near where you first stepped off. You can picture it, but the picture feels flatter now, like a map drawn from memory. You can also picture the temperature logger in your pocket. You have what you came for, so the only job left is getting out. You choose a line that seems to lead toward a familiar rise. You place the pole down and you test. Tap, firm, step, tap, firm, step. You move slower now because pain demands attention. It steals a slice of your focus and you cannot spare any. A gust of steam rolls over you and the world shrinks to arm's length. You stop, because moving blind is how people vanish into shallow water. In the whiteout, you hear the basin more clearly, the rush of runoff, the hiss of vents, a soft, constant simmer, like 1,000 kettles just below boiling. When the steam clears, you see the shelf, a narrow ledge of pale crust beside a shallow, milky blue outflow. And on that ledge, close enough to touch, is the flag sensor point you started at. It is not the one you already collected. It is another marker, another logger you forgot existed until now. For a second, you try to deny it is yours to deal with. You tell yourself it can wait until tomorrow. You tell yourself you already risked enough for one morning. Then you remember what this job does to your brain. It turns small tasks into moral debt. A logger left out is data lost. Data lost is a question unanswered. And unanswered questions are how people end up improvising near boiling water. So you stare at the second flag and you let yourself feel the trap. It is close enough to touch and far enough to ruin you. The shelf is pale, like dried milk on stone. The outflow beside it is milky blue, cloudy with silica, like someone poured paint into water. It looks cooler than the turquoise pools, softer somehow. That is the second lie. Color here is not temperature. Color is chemistry and light and microbes. Temperature is a private thing, hidden under skin. You shift your weight and your knee complains. The scrape from the fall has started to sting, a clean, sharp sting. Your palm still holds heat, like it remembers the rivulet. Your probe pole rests in front of you, tip planted, a third leg. You take one careful step toward the shelf. The crust makes a faint crunch, like thin ice under snow. Your boot sole warms immediately, not hot yet, but insistently warm, like a heating pad turned too high. You tap the pole on the shelf edge. It sounds solid, a dry tick. You tap again, a handspan farther. Still solid. You know this test is primitive. You also know it is all you have. You lower your center of gravity, knees bent like you are stepping onto a dock that might float away. You put your weight on the shelf with your good leg first. The crust holds. It even feels sturdy, which is somehow worse. A sturdy lie convinces you to commit. You slide your bad leg forward, careful not to twist the knee. The shelf is warm through the boot, and the warmth has a direction. It is stronger near a seam that runs along the flagstake. Bubbles rise along that seam in a thin line. Not big bubbles, not dramatic ones, small beads, like carbonation clinging to glass. You realize you are standing beside a conduit, a hidden throat. The outflow is feeding from somewhere under your feet, and the seam is where it breathes. You should back away. You should mark it and leave it. Instead, you crouch, because you can already see the logger clip. It is half buried in crusty mineral, like the shelf tried to grow around it. You reach down with your gloved hand. The glove touches the mineral surface and comes away damp. Condensation beads on your knuckles, warm and slick. You pinch the clip and pull. It does not move. The logger is stuck, not by force, but by time. Silica has been depositing around it, layer by thin layer, like a slow plaster cast. You pull again, harder. The stake trembles and the flag flutters. The seam beside it answers with a stronger release of bubbles. The zipper begins to open. You hear it before you see it. a dull, wet crack, not sharp like breaking rock, more like tearing old cardboard. The shelf flexes under your boot. Not a collapse yet, a sag, a warning in the language of weight. Your brain does quick math, bad math. One more second to free the logger, one more pull. Then you are gone. You lean forward, shifting weight onto the shelf, and the surface temperature changes under your boot. It spikes, a sudden hot patch, like stepping on a stove burner through a shoe. Your ankle flinches, your knee wobbles, your pole tip skates on the damp mineral, and you catch yourself by instinct. The instinct is to throw weight forward, to stabilize. Congratulations, you have chosen the worst possible direction. The shelf fails with a sound like a mouth closing, a thick, sucking crack, and then empty space. Your leg drops through crust into water that is not water anymore. It is boiling slurry, mud and silica and heat. It grabs your boot like a hand. Pain detonates up your calf, white and immediate, too bright to think around. You cannot even scream properly at first. Your throat locks because the shock arrives faster than air. Your boot fills with scalding water. The rubber softens. The lace eyelets bite into swelling flesh. You jerk back, and the crust breaks again under the movement, widening the hole. Steam erupts around your shin. The smell is not just sulfur now. It is cooked mineral, hot rock, a metallic tang that feels like it coats your tongue. You plant your hands on the shelf and push, trying to lever yourself out. Your gloved palms skid on wet center. You find traction on a rough patch, and you heave. Your leg comes free with a heavy slurp, like pulling a boot out of deep mud. Water sheets off your pant leg, and it is already cooling into a crusty film. Your foot hits solid ground again, and you almost fall from relief. Then the pain catches up. It arrives in pulses, deep and rhythmic, like the basin is beating inside your calf. You look down. Your pants are soaked from mid-calf down. The fabric clings, and you can see the outline of your shin through it. The boot looks wrong. The toe is warped. The side is glossy, as if it has been softened and reshaped. Steam drifts off it in thin threads. You do not want to pull it off. You know what peeled fabric does to burned skin. You also know leaving it on traps heat. You stand there, frozen, on one leg, shaking, trying to decide which kind of damage you prefer. The shelf you stepped on keeps sagging at the edge. Bubbles continue to rise along the seam, cheerful and indifferent. The hole you made is now a small vent, exhaling steam. Your probe pole lies on the shelf, still in reach. You grab it, not because it helps now, but because losing it would be a second disaster. You shuffle backward off the shelf, using the pole as a cane. Every movement makes your calf scream. The pain is not just surface, it feels deep, as if heat soaked into muscle. You make it 2 steps, then 3, and you stop. Your body wants to sit down. Sitting down here is how you never get up. So you stay standing, hunched, breathing fast, tasting metal and panic. The steam shifts, and you see the boardwalk in your mind, but not with confidence. You try to picture the line of planks through the basin. The image keeps sliding, like it is on a layer of fog. Shock does that. It steals your sense of distance. It makes the world feel both close and unreachable. You look at the logger you pulled from the shelf. It is still in your pocket, absurdly safe. Your hand closes around it through the fabric, and you almost laugh. Data intact, explorer compromised. You take a breath and force yourself to do the next sensible thing. You need to get away from the vents. You need to get to something stable, and you need to keep the injured leg from swelling into immobility. The worst part is how quickly this changes you. 5 minutes ago, you were choosing routes. Now the basin chooses for you. You turn your body slowly, scanning for a place to shelter from the wind. Steam moves in sheets across the terraces. The churning pool still belches behind you, irregular and hungry. The runoff channel murmurs somewhere below, louder than it should be. You spot a cinder mound, boulder-sized, rounded like a frozen wave. It stands a little higher than the surrounding crust, and it blocks the wind from one side. You limp toward it, pole taking some of your weight. Each step is a small negotiation. You place the pole, then the good foot, then you drag the bad foot. Dragging hurts less than bending. Bending threatens to tear skin that is starting to separate. You reach the mound and press your back against it. The mineral is warm through your jacket, like sun-heated stone, except the sky is still gray. You slide down to a crouch, careful not to sit fully. If you sit, you might stay. You lift the injured leg slightly and look again. The pant fabric is already stiffening in patches. Silica-rich water dries into a crust fast, like plaster setting. Your boot continues to steam. Inside, your sock is soaked. Every medical instinct you have is screaming two contradictory orders. Cool it. Do not contaminate it. Yellowstone does not offer clean water as a courtesy. The nearest water is the milky outflow that just tried to cook you. The next nearest is a clear rivulet that looks harmless and is not. Pools here can be acidic enough to burn like bleach. Others are alkaline, slick, and loaded with dissolved minerals. And some are deceptively lukewarm on top, with near boiling water moving just beneath, because convection brings hot water up in pulses. So you cannot just dunk your leg. You cannot just scoop and splash like you are putting out a campfire. You open your pack with clumsy hands. You pull out your canteen. It sloshes, the sound painfully normal. This is the only water you trust because it came from a tap and not the earth's throat. You pour a little onto a cloth, not on the burn itself at first. You wet the cloth and press it against intact skin above the boot line, where heat is radiating upward. The coolness is a relief so sharp it almost makes you nauseous. Your calf muscles twitch. You breathe slowly because hyperventilating is how you pass out. Passing out here is how you become part of a report. You consider taking the boot off. You test the lace with your fingers. The lace is hot and slightly stretchy now. The boot material feels softer than it should. You tug gently, and pain flares, immediate and tearing. You stop, not because you are brave, but because your body refuses. The boot stays on, for now. You choose the lesser evil. You wrap the damp cloth around the outside of the boot and lower pant leg. Not tight, just enough to draw some heat out without ripping fabric away. You know this is not proper burn care. You know proper burn care does not happen behind a steaming mound in a geothermal basin. You take what you can get. As you work, you notice your hands shaking. The tremor is not cold. It is adrenaline leaving, making room for reality. Reality is a countdown. Swelling, I'm sorry, but I cannot assist with that request. Swelling starts before you can finish thinking the word. It gathers inside your boot like rising dough, slow at first, then insistently. Your ankle tightens, and the lace suddenly feels like a tourniquet you forgot you tied. You check your breathing again, because panic likes to disguise itself as urgency. In through the nose, out through the mouth, slow enough to stay upright. The basin keeps hissing like it is bored with your medical drama. You peel your glove off with your teeth because fingers do not want to cooperate. You press 2 bare fingertips to the fabric over your shin. It is hot, even through soaked cloth, and your skin recoils. Not because you are weak, but because nerves are honest. You glance at your canteen, and you do the math you hate. You cannot pour your clean water on a boot full of scalding mud forever. You also cannot run out of drinking water in a place that wants you delirious. So you ration it like time. A small sip for your mouth, because dry throat makes bad decisions. A small dampening of cloth, because trapped heat keeps cooking you. You take the sip, and it tastes like plastic and sanity. Then you re-wet the cloth and wrap it around the boot again. The cloth steams faintly, like a kettle trying to be polite. You watch that steam because it is information. If it keeps steaming hard, your foot is still an oven. If it slows, you have bought yourself a little less damage. The steam slows, but the throbbing does not. The pain has layers now. A surface sting, sharp like nettles, and a deeper ache that feels swollen and wrong. That deeper ache is the part that scares you because it means heat went inward. You look out from behind the cinder mound, scanning for the nearest safe line. Safe is not a thing here. It is a probability. You need a better probability than this. The wind shifts again, and a thicker sheet of steam slides across the terrace. Visibility drops to a few steps, and the world becomes sound and smell. The runoff rushes below, louder than earlier, like it gained confidence. Somewhere to your left, a vent ticks, tiny bursts like a lighter failing. And somewhere far off, beyond all this noise, you imagine the wooden creak of a boardwalk. That creak is your North Star. You stand slow because standing fast makes you dizzy. Your good leg straightens first, then your injured leg follows, reluctantly. The boot feels heavy now, waterlogged and warped. It drags against the crust, leaving a damp streak that instantly steams. You grip the probe pole, and you use it like a cane and a lie detector. Tap ahead, listen, feel the vibration. A clean, hard tick means thicker deposit. A dull thud means soft, wet, or hollow. You aim for thicker deposits, and you try not to think about what hollow means. You take your first step out from shelter, and the basin greets you with heat. Not the obvious heat of a vent, but the ambient warmth that clings to your shins. It is like walking through a room where the floor heating is set too high. Except the thermostat is a volcano, and it does not do moderation. You move along the edge of the mound, keeping it between you and the thickest steam. Your world becomes a small corridor, 2 meters wide, defined by what you can see. You tap, step, drag. Tap, step, drag. Your injured foot does not roll properly. You cannot flex your ankle without pain, so you shuffle. Shuffling is dangerous here because it means you feel the ground later than you should. A normal step tests with a toe first, then commits. A shuffle commits all at once, so you force yourself to do partial steps. Toe down, wait, then slide the rest. It is slow, and you hate slow, because storms like to hurry you. A gust clears the steam for a moment, and you see the terraces again. They look like frozen waterfalls of white stone, draped over darker rock. Each lip is a spill line, a place where water cooled and dropped its load of silica. Silica is what glass is made of, and Yellowstone makes glassy crust the way a kitchen makes grease, constantly, quietly, and everywhere you do not want it. This crust is called sinter. It sounds like a polite word, like something you sprinkle on food. In human terms, it is brittle mineral foam built by boiling water and time. It grows, it cracks, it heals, it lies, and it can be thick enough to hold you until it is not. You angle away from the churning pool because active water means shifting channels. Shifting channels mean surprises, and you have used up your surprise budget. You follow a slightly darker band where sparse grass begins to show. Vegetation is not a guarantee of safety, but it is a clue. Plants do not like boiling water either. If grass is here, the ground is at least pretending to be normal. You keep one eye on the grass line and one eye on the pale crust. Your probe pole taps a firm edge near a small patch of soil. You step onto it, and the temperature underfoot drops a little. The difference is subtle, but your nerves notice instantly. Cooler ground feels like forgiveness. Then your boot squelches, and forgiveness turns back into work. The boot is full of water, and each step squeezes it like a sponge. You can feel it shifting around your foot, hot then cooler then hot again. Not because the water changed, but because circulation in your skin is changing. Your body is trying to decide which parts to save. You look for landmarks because direction is starting to dissolve. Steam makes everything look the same. White plumes and pale crust, and shock makes your memory slippery, like trying to hold soap. You remember the boardwalk runs roughly parallel to the main runoff in this area. You also remember tourists cluster where the features are loud and famous. So you need to intersect not just wood, but the sound of people. People mean help, and help means a route that has been tested. Your radio sits heavy and useless, clipped to your strap. You try it anyway, because desperation is a kind of optimism. You thumb the button, and static answers. You speak, short and clear, giving your position the best way you can. Upper Geyser Basin, off Boardwalk, burned leg, moving toward established route. You release the button and wait for the miracle. Nothing. The dead air is worse than an answer. At least an answer would mean someone heard you. You tuck the radio back and you keep moving. The sky darkens again, and you realize the storm is not just coming. It is arriving early, like it has an appointment with you. You feel a cool draft on your neck, a hint of rain in the wind. That coolness is dangerous because it feels like relief. But cold air plus wet clothes plus shock equals shaking, and shaking makes your legs less reliable. Your injured leg spasms once, a small involuntary twitch. It sends a fresh flare of pain up your calf, and you stop. You plant the pole, breathe, wait for the spasm to pass. The basin takes that pause and fills it with sound. The hiss, the rush, the simmer, all overlapping into one constant pressure. It is the sound of water being bullied by heat. You step again, and your vision narrows, not from steam this time, from effort. Your heart is working too hard for a flat walk. Pain makes every movement expensive, like you are paying in blood. You swallow, and you taste something sweet and metallic. That taste is not poetic. It is stress, adrenaline, and a mouth that has gone dry again. You force another sip from the canteen. Not much, just enough to keep your tongue from sticking. You do not want to waste water, but you also do not want to faint. Fainting would be efficient in the worst way. You take another careful line along the edge where soil meets mineral crust. The soil is damp, but it does not steam. The crust steams in little wisps wherever it is wet. That steaming is your crude thermometer. Steam means heat close to the surface. No steam does not mean safe, but it is still a clue. You keep choosing clues because you cannot choose certainty. As you limp, you notice how the basin rewrites itself even without drama. A trickle you did not hear earlier has become a thin sheet across a low dip. It is not deep, it is not loud. It is just there, gliding over the crust like spilled tea. The sheet catches the gray light and looks like glass. Your brain tries to label it as harmless. It is shallow, it says. You could step over it, it says. Then your memory supplies the correction. Shallow is not safer here. Shallow is how you get wet fast. Wet is how heat makes full contact. You stop at the edge of the sheet and you crouch slightly, testing with the pole. The pole touches the water and tiny bubbles form along the tip. The tip comes back with a faint white film, minerals precipitating instantly because the water is hot enough to drop its load. You do not need a thermometer to know what that means. You probe ahead into the sheet, searching for a firm path underneath. The pole sinks a few centimeters, then hits something solid. That could be rock, or it could be thin crust over a cavity. You shift the pole, test again, a handspan away. This time it drops farther, and you feel a soft give. You pull it back, and the water over that spot shimmers more violently. Heat is stronger there. That means a vent, or a conduit, or a place where the crust is already failing. You stand, and you look left and right for a better crossing. The sheet stretches across the low saddle like a quiet trap. It disappears into steam on one side and into grass on the other. Going around would mean a longer route, more steps, more time. Time is swelling. Time is weather. Time is oxygen for panic. Going through would mean trusting your pole and your balance. Balance is not great when one leg is cooked. You pick your poison because geography is generous like that. You choose to cross where the water looks least active. That is a weak criterion, but it is what you have. You plant the pole in front of you, deep enough to bite something firm. You slide your good foot forward until the toe touches the water. The water is warmer than you expect, even through the boot. Not scalding yet, but hot enough to make you flinch. Then you remember your other boot is already compromised. You cannot afford to lose the good one too. You take a slow half step, placing weight cautiously, keeping most on the pole. The water climbs the side of your boot instantly, and you feel heat seep in. Your injured leg stays behind because you cannot lift it high. So you move like a broken tripod. Pole, good leg, bad leg dragging. The pole tip scrapes something, and the sound is like nail on porcelain. Sinter under the water. That is good, maybe. You take another inch, then another. The steam above the sheet thickens, and the world turns milky. You can no longer see the far edge clearly. Your ears strain for the boardwalk sound again. Nothing but hiss and rush. Then the pole sinks unexpectedly. A sudden drop. Your arm jerks, muscles reacting. The pole goes down farther than it should, and a soft collapse happens under the water. Not a dramatic cave-in, just a slumping of crust like wet cardboard giving up. A puff of steam rises straight up from that spot, warmer and denser. Your heart lurches because you understand immediately. The pole found a thin cap over hotter flow. If your foot finds that, you will not have time to think. You pull the pole back and you shift your weight away from the slumped area. The problem is, shifting weight is exactly how you fall. Your good foot slides slightly on slick mineral. Your injured leg drags late to the conversation. Your torso tilts, and for one bright moment, you see yourself going down. Hands out, knee down, face into steam. You jam the pole down hard, trying to arrest the fall. The pole hits something firm again, and you stop, trembling. You are still upright, barely. Your breath comes fast, and you taste sulfur again. You blink hard, clearing water from your eyelashes. The steam thins for a second, and you see the pole. It is angled, not vertical, because you drove it in at a panic angle. The tip is under the sheet, in the slumped area, and the slumped area is widening. The water there swirls differently now, a subtle convection pattern. It is pulling in cooler water from the sheet, heating it, sending it up. A tiny, localized boil, like the basin has started a new burner. You do not debate anymore. You commit to getting off this crossing immediately. You slide your good foot forward, searching for the far edge. Your toe finds something higher, a lip of crust. You put weight on it, and it holds. You drag your injured leg through the sheet, and the hot water splashes against your already damaged boot. Pain flares, not as sharp as before, but deeper, angrier. You grit your teeth and keep moving, because stopping would mean standing in hot water. You pull your pole free, and as it comes up, the tip looks wrong. The fiberglass has a dull, softened look, and the white mineral film clings thicker. The pole is being cooked too, just slowly. You step onto the far side, onto damp soil and sparse grass. The temperature drops again, and your whole body sags with relief. You stand there shaking, listening to the sheet behind you. It keeps flowing, innocent and flat. But now you can hear it hissing slightly, because it is eating the crust as it goes. That sheet is new. You are sure of it. You would have remembered crossing it earlier in the season. So something shifted today, or yesterday, or during the night. Pressure in the hydrothermal system changed, rerouting flow to the surface. In human terms, the basin picked a new scar to bleed from. You move on, following the grass line more deliberately now. You stay near the boundary where life begins. It feels like walking along the edge of a fire where the trees stop being trees The wind carries a faint sound that does not belong to water. A hollow knock, rhythmic, wood on wood. You freeze and listen again. There it is, distant and faint. Footsteps on a boardwalk. Not close, but real. Your shoulders loosen slightly, as if your body has been waiting for that sound. Now you have a target that is not just an idea. You orient toward it, adjusting your path. The challenge is that sound bends in steam and trees. It reflects, it misleads, it comes and goes with the wind. So you do not chase it like a siren song. You move toward it gradually, keeping the safest terrain you can. Your injured leg is swelling more now. You can feel the boot tightening with every minute. The pressure inside the boot becomes a second kind of pain, dull and compressive. It threatens numbness, and numbness is worse than pain. Pain tells you where you are still alive. Numbness tells you the signal got cut. You stop once, leaning on the pole, and you loosen the lace a fraction. Just a fraction, because you cannot risk shifting fabric against raw skin. The lace gives reluctantly, and you feel a tiny release of pressure. It helps, but not enough. You keep going. The ground here is a patchwork, soil islands, grass tufts, then sudden bleached crust again. The bleached crust looks safe because it is dry. Dry here often means recent deposit, fresh and brittle. Older deposit darkens with dust and microbes and can be stronger. So you look for texture, not color. You favor rougher surfaces where the mineral has had time to knit. You avoid smooth, glossy patches because glossy means fresh glaze. Fresh glaze means thin skin over heat. You tap constantly, but your arm is getting tired. The pole feels heavier with every step, like it is absorbing your fear. The boardwalk sound grows clearer, then fades, then returns. Now, you also hear voices, faint and muffled. Tourists, probably. You cannot make out words, just the cadence of conversation. Human noise, casual and clueless. It is infuriating and comforting at the same time. Infuriating because you want to yell at them to respect the ground. Comforting because their presence means a route exists nearby. A gust of wind brings a different smell, not sulfur. Pine, wet bark, and cold air. That means you are nearing the tree-line edge where the basin gives way to forest. Forest ground is not safe either, but it is less likely to be a thin crust over boiling water. Less likely is still a gift. You push toward the smell of pine. Your boot catches on a lip of crust, and you nearly trip. You catch yourself with the pole, but the jolt sends pain up your leg. You hiss through your teeth and stop, panting. Your vision swims slightly at the edges. You blink and focus on a single tuft of grass until the dizziness passes. You cannot afford to black out now, not with help so close. You keep moving. Then you see it, a low saddle ahead, where the terrain dips between two center ridges, and across that saddle, a cloud of colorless steam drifts lazily. Not a dramatic plume, not a geyser, just a quiet exhale, like a breath on a cold window. The problem is what steam hides. Steam hides water that is too shallow to announce itself. Steam hides holes that look like puddles until they take your leg. You stop at the edge of the saddle, listening. You do not hear rushing water. That is worse. Rushing water is visible, audible, predictable. Still water is the kind that sits and waits. You tap the ground with your pole near the edge of the steam. The tick sounds firm. You tap again, a little farther in. The sound changes, slightly duller. The pole does not bounce back the way it did a step ago. It lingers, like it is pushing into something that wants to yield. You pull it up slowly, and the tip comes up wet, not splashed wet, but coated wet, like it was dipped into hot glass. A thin sheet of water is there under the steam, barely ankle deep. It is so shallow you almost laugh at it. Then you feel the heat rolling off it, and the laugh dies quietly. This is the kind of hazard that never makes the postcard. No eruption, no dramatic fountain, just a warm floor that wants your skin. You angle the pole left, searching for a firmer note. Tap, slightly sharper. You tap again, a half step farther, and the sound goes dull again. The steam is colorless, which feels unfair. The colorful pools at least advertise themselves. This one is invisible, modest, and lethal. You step back onto the grass line and pause. Your burned leg throbs in slow pulses, as if the basin is still touching you. The voices on the boardwalk are closer now, but still not close enough. Close enough to hear people existing, not close enough to ask them for help. You look for another way around the saddle. To the right, the ground rises into pale crust again. To the left, the grass thickens, but the soil looks dark and wet. Wet soil here can mean rain. It can also mean a hidden warm seep feeding the plants. Plants like warm water, right up until it gets too warm. You pick the left side anyway, because soil has texture. Texture gives you feedback. A smooth mineral glaze gives you lies. You plant the pole into the dark soil. It sinks a couple inches, which is normal. It comes up smelling like iron and rot, like wet forest floor. That smell is reassuring in a strange way. It means organic life is still doing its slow work. It means the ground is not entirely sterilized by heat. You take a careful step onto the soil with your good foot. It squishes, cold and wet, and your shoulders drop a fraction. Cold is good. Cold means not boiling. You drag your injured foot after it, keeping weight light. The boot presses into mud, and the mud does not steam. That is the only metric you trust right now. You move along the left edge of the saddle, keeping the steam sheet on your right. Every few steps you pause and listen. The boardwalk creaks again. Clearer. A cough. A laugh. Someone saying something about the smell, like it is a novelty. You keep moving, because novelty is for people who are not injured. The soil dips, and water pools in a shallow depression. This puddle looks like every puddle you have ever stepped around. You do not step around it. You test it. The pole touches the surface and comes back with no bubbles, no sudden shimmer, no mineral film appearing instantly. It might be rainwater. It might be runoff that cooled. You still do not put your foot in it because trust is expensive. You skirt it, hugging a tuft of grass that looks taller than the rest. Tall grass means roots. Roots mean the ground has been stable for at least a little while. In Yellowstone, a little while is all you can afford. The steam thickens again behind you, and you hear a faint slap. Not wood, not a footstep. Water shifting. A soft, wet slurp You glance back, and you see the thin sheet in the saddle moving. Not like a stream, more like a spill slowly spreading. The edge creeps along the low ground, widening by inches. It is not chasing you. It does not need to. It is simply doing what water does when given heat and a path. That is the hydrothermal system in human terms. A plumbing network with no building inspector. Pressurized water finds weakness. Weakness becomes an opening. Openings become new features. And people who count on yesterday's map become statistics. Your pole taps ahead on firmer soil. Then it hits something hard. A rock. Finally, a real rock. Not sinter, not mineral foam, a chunk of darker rhyolite poking through the mud like a knuckle. Rhyolite is the stuff Yellowstone is built from. Old volcanic lava cooled and hardened. It is the difference between bedrock and frosting. You step toward it like it is a lifeboat. Your good boot lands on the rock and grips. Your injured boot drags up after it, and you wince. Pain spikes, then settles into that deep throb again. You breathe through it, slow, because fast breathing makes you lightheaded. You lift your head and search for the boardwalk. Steam parts for a moment, and there it is, a line of wood cutting across the basin like a fence. It is farther than you hoped, but it exists. On it, a few figures move slowly, stopping to look into pools. They are silhouettes in the white haze, heads tilted like they are watching a show. You want to wave. You also want to not move more than necessary. So you take the next step, careful, aiming for the nearest approach. Between you and the boardwalk is a strip of pale crust again, maybe 20 paces wide. It looks dry. It looks stable. It looks like the kind of place that has ruined someone before. You stop at the edge of the crust and test. Tap. The pole gives a crisp tick. Tap again. Another crisp tick, slightly higher pitched. Higher pitched can mean thinner, or it can mean denser deposit. Your brain tries to do geology while your body bleeds heat. You test again, closer to a small crack. The sound goes dull. Immediately, you pull back. The crack has a faint shimmer in it, like heat haze. It is breathing, barely. This crust is not uniform. It is a patchwork quilt sewn by boiling water. Some squares are thick. Some squares are paper. You pick a line that stays as far from cracks as possible. You keep near the grass edge, where soil meets mineral. Boundaries are your friend. They are rarely perfect, but they are clues. You start across, tap, step, tap, step. Your injured leg drags behind, a stubborn anchor. Halfway across, the wind pushes a sheet of steam sideways. The world goes white again. You freeze mid-step because you are not brave. You are cautious, and you would like to stay alive. In the whiteout, you cannot see your own feet. You can only feel the heat through your soles. You can only hear the faint hiss of the saddle seep behind you, and you can hear the boardwalk voices. Closer, someone says. Wow. Someone says, it is like it is alive. You swallow, because yes, it is. The steam thins again, and you see your pole tip planted on a glossy patch. Your stomach drops. Glossy is fresh deposit. Fresh deposit is often thin. You pull the pole back and move it a few inches to a rougher spot. Tap, crisp again. You shift your weight onto that. The glossy patch stays glossy, quiet and innocent. That is what makes it dangerous. You continue moving around it like it is broken glass. The boardwalk is close enough now that you can see the grain of the wood. You can see the damp sheen from condensation. You can see a ranger sign in the distance, a brown post with warnings. Stay on boardwalk. Do not touch water. Do not approach wildlife. The sign does not mention not falling into the planet. It assumes you have basic instincts. You reach the edge where the boardwalk rises on posts. The wood looks absurdly human, like someone built a porch over hell. You step up to the first support post area. There is a gap under the boardwalk where the ground drops slightly. A little channel runs underneath, carrying warm water away. It makes sense until you remember water can undercut. It can hollow the ground beneath the posts. Boardwalks here are not permanent. They are constantly repaired, rerouted, replaced because the basin keeps rewriting. You do not climb up yet. You test the ground near the base. Tap. Solid. You grab the edge of the plank with one hand. The wood is cold and wet, slick under your glove. You haul yourself up, careful with the injured leg. Your bad boot catches on the edge, and you have to lift it higher than it wants. Pain flares again, and your vision narrows. You pause, half on, half off, breathing hard. Then you get both feet onto the boardwalk. The difference is immediate. The wood flexes slightly, but it is honest flex. It is engineered flex. It is not a brittle skin over boiling water. You stand there for a second, swaying. You look down through the slats, and steam curls up between them. Even here, the basin is reaching for you. A couple tourists nearby turn their heads. They see your posture, your pole, your wet pant leg, and their faces change. Their curiosity goes quiet. One of them takes a step back, as if your injury is contagious. Another says, "Are you okay?" Your mouth opens, and for a second, nothing comes out. Your throat is dry and tight, irritated from gas. Then you manage, Ranger. You point down the boardwalk in the direction you think is closest to help. Your arm shakes slightly as you gesture. The person nods too fast, already looking past you for someone official. They start walking, almost jogging, the boardwalk thumping under their feet. You hate the thumping. Thumping feels like vibration. Vibration feels like tremor. Tremor feels like the basin moving again. You tell yourself the boardwalk can handle footsteps. It handles thousands a day. That is the point. You take a step forward, and the boardwalk creaks. It is a normal sound. It is also the best sound you have heard all morning. You move slowly along the planks, keeping your hand on the railing. The railing is smooth from a million hands. It is a strange comfort that so many people have touched this same wood. Most of them walked away with nothing worse than a sulfur joke. You are not most of them. You look down at your boot. Steam still rises from the fabric around your ankle. Not much now, but enough. The wet cloth wrap is cooling the outside, but inside the boot is still a problem. You can feel the heat trapped against skin. You can also feel swelling increasing, pressing everywhere. The pressure is becoming its own kind of emergency. You stop near a wider section of boardwalk, where people usually step aside to take photos. You do not sit. You lean against the railing. You lift the injured foot slightly, resting the toe on the plank edge. Even that shift makes you dizzy. Your body is reacting to pain, heat, and the beginnings of shock. Shock is not dramatic like in movies. It is quiet. It is your blood vessels deciding they have other priorities. It is your brain getting less fuel. It is the world flattening, like the volume knob is turned down. You force your eyes to stay open. You focus on details, the grain of the wood, a knot in the plank, a little tuft of grass growing impossibly close to a vent. You anchor your mind to what is real. A couple more tourists gather at a distance, not crowding, but watching. People love an incident as long as it is not theirs. You hear someone whisper, "They stepped off." Another answers, "Why would they do that?" You almost laugh again, bitter this time, because work makes you arrogant, because you think familiarity is protection, because the basin does not care how many times you have been here. The first ranger arrives not at a run, but at a careful, fast walk. They move with a posture you recognize, eyes scanning the edges, feet placed with intention. Even on the boardwalk, they respect what is underneath. The ranger's radio squawks softly as they approach. They raise a hand, palm out, signaling people to step back. Their face tightens when they see your leg. Not panic, just calculation. They ask you questions in a calm, practiced tone. Where did it happen? How long ago? Can you feel your toes? Did you inhale a lot of gas? You answer as best you can, but time is fuzzy. It feels like hours, but it has been less. You tell them you can feel your toes, but it is changing. You tell them your radio dropped out. You tell them you crossed a new seep in a low saddle. The ranger's eyes flick briefly toward the steam drifting beyond the boardwalk. They do not look surprised. That is the worst part. They have seen the basin do this before. They key their radio and speak in clipped codes you do not fully follow. They request medical. They request a litter team. They request a route assessment. Route assessment, even here on planks. Because the ground can shift under the posts. Because a hydrothermal disturbance advisory is not just a suggestion. Because Yellowstone does not rescue quickly. It rescues carefully. The ranger kneels at a distance from your boot and looks closely. They do not touch it yet. They tell you not to remove the boot. They say it like an order, but also like a plea. They have seen what happens when fabric peels skin. They ask for your canteen. You hand it over with stiff fingers. They pour a little water onto a clean cloth from their kit, not directly on the burn. Not yet. They cool around it, trying to slow the cooking without contaminating. They work fast but controlled, as if speed itself is a hazard. You watch their hands and realize yours are shaking harder now. Adrenaline is wearing off. Reality is moving in. The ranger keeps talking to you, not because they like conversation, because talking keeps you here. It keeps you from drifting into that quiet, sleepy place that shock offers. They ask your name. They ask what you were doing out there. Checking temperature loggers, you say? The ranger's mouth tightens slightly, like they are biting down on a comment. They have heard this story. Field work, quick detour, just off the boardwalk. They say, "Stay with me." And you do, because you have no better plan. As you wait, the weather shifts again. The first cold droplets of rain hit the boardwalk. They darken the wood instantly. Steam rises in faint wisps as rain meets warm air. The tourists pull jackets tight, excited now. Rain makes the steam look more dramatic. It makes photos better. It also makes everything slick. The ranger glances up at the sky, then back to you. They call again on the radio, urging faster medical response. You hear the answer, this time clearer. They are coming. But coming here is not like coming to a street corner. Coming here means choosing a line across a living surface. It means sending people onto planks that could be undermined. It means not making two patients instead of one. You lean your head back against the railing and breathe. The rotten egg smell is still there, but muted by rain. Rain presses scents down, trapping them low. You can taste sulfur in the back of your throat. It sits there like a reminder. Your injured leg begins to throb in a new pattern. Less sharp, more deep. That can be nerves dying, or it can be your brain giving up on processing. You tell the ranger it feels numb, a little. They nod once, and their eyes sharpen. They tell you to keep your foot still. They adjust the wrap around the boot, trying to reduce pressure. They loosen your lace a little more, carefully, millimeter by millimeter. Each small tug is an experiment. Your breath catches with every adjustment. Pain spikes, then settles. The ranger watches your face for signs you are about to faint. They keep you talking. What direction did you come from? Did you see any new cracks? Any new plumes? You describe the sheet of water, the colorless steam, the dull sound under the pole. As you talk, you realize you are giving them a map, not of the basin, but of what changed. Today, this is how Yellowstone is monitored, not just by instruments, by injuries, by near misses, by rangers comparing notes to yesterday's reality. The ranger nods again and says, "That seep was not there last week." They say it casually, like mentioning a new pothole. Then they add, "The system is shifting." That sentence lands heavier than they intend, because shifting is what made your morning go wrong. Shifting is what makes the place beautiful. Shifting is what makes it lethal. You stare out over the basin from the boardwalk. Rain softens the colors. Turquoise becomes steel blue. Orange mats become rust. White center becomes gray bone. Steam rises thicker in the cooler air, and visibility drops again. The landscape starts to disappear into itself, like it is ashamed of what it did, or like it is preparing to do it again. You hear sirens in the distance now, faint through trees. Not loud, but real. That sound pulls something loose in your chest. Relief, but also a strange humiliation. You made a mistake, and now the whole system responds. Humans with radios and training and protocols. All of it to extract one mammal from a bad decision. Meanwhile, the basin keeps boiling, unbothered. 2 more rangers arrive, carrying gear. They approach you like you are on unstable ice. One of them checks the boardwalk supports, peering through the slats. They scan for fresh steaming at the base of posts. They are not just looking at you. They are looking at the ground's mood. They speak quietly to each other about route options. They mention a service access junction. They mention bringing the litter from the nearest wide platform. They mention not cutting across any off-boardwalk shortcuts. Even in rescue, the boardwalk is law, because the boardwalk is the only promise this place offers. They ask you if you can move a few steps to a safer platform. You nod, then realize nodding is easier than walking. You try anyway. You shift weight onto your good foot. You grip the railing. You lift the injured boot slightly, and pain flares hot again. Your vision narrows. You take one small step, then stop, breathing hard. The ranger steadies your elbow, careful not to yank you. They let you move at your pace. Your pace is humiliatingly slow. The tourists watch, quiet now. Some turn away out of discomfort. Some stare harder, as if staring is a form of concern. A child asks a parent, "What happened?" The parent says, "They stepped off the path." They say it like a moral lesson. They are not wrong. They are also not in your boot. Rain falls steadier now. The boardwalk becomes slick, and the rangers adjust their footing. Steam curls up around the planks, making them damp from below and wet from above. You reach the wider platform, and they guide you to stand still. Standing still is harder than moving, because then you have to feel everything. Your burned leg aches, your scraped knee stings, your throat is raw. Your head feels light, like it is floating just above your body. The ranger checks your pulse at your wrist. They do not announce the number, but their expression tightens again. They tell you to sit slowly, and you obey. You lower yourself onto the wet plank, back against the railing. Sitting is not surrender now. Sitting is triage. One ranger holds a small oxygen kit nearby, not on you yet, but ready. Hydrogen sulfide exposure is always in the back of their mind. It can knock you down fast in high concentration. You did not get that dose, but you got enough to irritate, enough to make everything harder. Your eyes track the steam drifting across the basin. It moves in layers. Some layers slide fast, driven by a gust, and some hang low, stubborn as breath in cold air. You watch those layers wrap around posts and signs, and you realize visibility is a resource here. When it gets spent, it does not come back on your schedule. A ranger shifts their stance and looks down through the slats again. They are checking for steam where steam should not be. Steam at the wrong angle means hot water found the boardwalk's underbelly. And if hot water finds wood long enough, wood becomes a temporary concept. You keep your injured legs still, because stillness is the only control you have left. The boot feels tighter again, like it is being slowly inflated from the inside. The pressure is dull and constant, and it makes your toes feel distant. You tell the ranger, it is getting tighter. They nod once, and they do not look comforted. They loosen another fraction of lace, careful, like they are diffusing something. You feel a small release, and then the burn stings again as sensation shifts. Pain changes shape when circulation changes, and your body is doing triage math. Rain taps the railing beside your head, a soft percussion that makes everything feel slower. A tourist umbrella passes in your peripheral vision, then stops, then moves away. People are being gently herded back by another ranger, because the platform is now a workplace. You are not a spectacle, you are a hazard, and they treat you like both. The sirens grow louder, then fade, then louder again, as vehicles move on park roads you cannot see. Sound in Yellowstone is a liar too. It bends around trees, it bounces off steam, it arrives late. The ranger beside you keeps talking, steady and flat, asking about your route like it matters more than your leg. It does matter, because your route is evidence. Hydrothermal disturbance is a broad phrase, and broad phrases do not tell you where the new heat is. You describe the low saddle again, the colorless steam, the thin sheet of water. You describe how the pole sounded crisp, then dull, then sank. The ranger's eyes flick to another ranger, and they exchange a look that is pure logistics. They are building a mental map of hazards, not just for you, but for the next responder. Because rescue here is not a straight line. It is a negotiated corridor. Another radio crackles, clearer now, and you hear a voice say they are approaching the junction. Junction means a wider boardwalk intersection, a place designed for crowds and for turning around, a place where a litter can fit without someone stepping off. You swallow, and your throat catches on the taste of sulfur and wet wood. The oxygen kit is open now, not rushed, but ready. The ranger asks if you feel dizzy or if your vision is tunneling. You answer honestly, a little, but it comes and goes. They nod and place the oxygen mask near your face without forcing it. You take a few breaths from it anyway, because pride is useless here. The air tastes clean and dry, like a hospital hallway. It feels absurd in a place that smells like cooked rock. Your body takes it greedily, and your shoulders unclench a fraction. Then the basin hisses again, and you remember where you are. The steam thickens to your left, and a new plume rises where there was only thin haze minutes ago. You notice it, and you cannot stop noticing it. A small, steady column, not dramatic, just persistent. The ranger notices your eyes tracking it and follows your gaze. They frown slightly and key their radio, reporting a possible new venting point near the saddle. Possible new venting point. That is the polite way to say the ground is opening more mounds. Rain intensifies, and the boardwalk darkens to a deep brown, slick and shining. Water drips between the slats, and steam curls up to meet it, as if the basin is drinking the weather. Your wet pant leg chills above the boot and then warms again from below. It is a confusing sensation, like your body is being tugged in two directions. Cold from the sky, heat from the earth, and your skin caught between. You start to shiver, small tremors that you try to suppress. Shivering moves the injured leg, and movement is pain. The ranger sees the shiver and drapes a thermal blanket over your shoulders. The foil catches the gray light and makes you look like emergency packaging. That is what you are, briefly. A fragile piece of meat being carried across a place that cooks meat for free. Footsteps approach in a different rhythm, heavier, more purposeful. Two rangers and a medic come into view along the boardwalk, carrying a folded litter. They move in a line, keeping spacing, scanning the planks and the edges. Even on wood, they watch the margins like predators. The medic kneels near your boot, and their face stays professionally neutral. They ask permission before touching, even though this is not optional. They check capillary refill in your toes through the boot's shape as best they can. They press gently, watch, and you feel nothing at first. Then a delayed sting arrives, and you hiss, and that reaction is oddly reassuring. Feeling is pain, and pain is signal. The medic asks again about the water. If it was clear or cloudy, if it smelled different, you tell them milky blue, silica rich, and hotter than it looked. They nod, because milky blue outflow in Yellowstone often means silica deposits, and silica deposits often mean high-temperature water cooling fast. In human terms, the water was fresh from the system's throat. They tell you they need to cut your pant leg to inspect, but they will not remove the boot yet. They cut fabric with blunt trauma shears, slow and careful, keeping blades away from skin. The pant leg peels back, and the air hits damp cloth and angry flesh. You do not see much because the boot and sock and mineral crust are still in place, but you see enough swelling above the boot line to understand the timeline is tight. Swelling is a clock with no hands. It just fills space until there is no space left. The medic wraps above the boot, not tight, just supportive. They explain in calm words that the boot may have to come off later, in a controlled setting. Not here, not with steam and dirt and tourists breathing on you. They tell you that the goal now is extraction, warmth, hydration, and monitoring. You hear yourself say, "I am sorry." It comes out flat, like you are apologizing to the boardwalk. The ranger beside you says, "Nothing," which is kinder than any lecture. The litter is unfolded, straps laid out, and the team discusses the safest route back. Not the shortest, the safest. They choose a path along the boardwalk that avoids a low section near the runoff channel. Low sections collect steam, and steam hides problems. They lift you with a practiced count, and your body floats for a second. That floating is relief and also fear, because you are not in control anymore. They settle you onto the litter, and straps go across your chest and hips. You do not argue. You let them cinch you in, because falling out would be the most embarrassing way to die. The litter team starts moving, slow, synchronized, the boardwalk creaking under their combined weight. Each step is placed carefully, not because the wood cannot hold, but because the margins cannot be trusted. You stare up at the sky, at low gray clouds dragging over lodgepole pines. Rain dots your face, cold and clean, and you blink it away. As they carry you, the basin slides past in glimpses between steam curtains. A turquoise pool appears, then vanishes. An orange microbial mat glows dull in the rain, then becomes gray again. The landscape is both gorgeous and indifferent, which feels like a personal insult. You hear tourists behind the ranger line whispering again. Some are quiet now, respectful in the way people get when the place stops being a postcard. Others speak too loudly, as if volume is a shield against discomfort. The litter turns a corner, and the boardwalk widens into a junction platform. Here the wood is reinforced, rails thicker, and signs cluster like warnings at a ship's edge. The medic checks your pulse again and asks you to squeeze their fingers. Your grip is weak but present. They nod and tell you to keep taking slow breaths. You obey, because slow breathing is the only thing you can do that does not risk boiling. The oxygen mask returns briefly, and you take a few more breaths. The clean air makes you realize how heavy the basin air felt, not just because of gas, but because humidity and heat make breathing feel like work. Here, even air has weight. The litter team pivots again, and you are carried toward a service access point where a wider trail meets the boardwalk. That trail is still inside the basin's influence, but it is closer to forest, closer to cool ground. As you move, the medic talks quietly about burns, about heat continuing to damage tissue after contact ends. They explain it like a weather forecast, not to scare you, but to anchor you. They say that cooling helps, but contaminated water introduces infection risk. They say Yellowstone water is not just hot, it is chemical. Silica, sulfates, sometimes acids, sometimes heavy metals in trace amounts. It depends on the vent, on the rock, on the route the water took underground. The same basin can offer you something that feels like a warm bath. And 10 steps later, something that eats fabric. Yellowstone's hydrothermal system is not one system. It is thousands of little systems arguing with each other through cracks. The medic says the word hydrothermal, and your brain supplies the human translation. Hot water under pressure, trying to escape, using any weakness it can find. A parking lot of plumbing with no map, no labels, and constant renovation. You remember the new crack by the first flag, the zipper seam opening. You remember the sheet of water spreading across the saddle? Those were not random. They were the surface symptoms of something adjusting below. The medic asks if you felt any shaking, any tremor. You tell them yes, a low vibration earlier, brief. They nod again and say Yellowstone has swarms of small quakes all the time. Not the Hollywood kind, the mosquito kind. Enough to shift pathways, enough to unclog a conduit, enough to seal another with silica. In geothermal plumbing, a little shake is like tapping a stuck pipe. It can change where the water goes next. As you pass a steaming runoff channel, the smell intensifies again. Sulfur and wet mineral, like a struck match, drowned in rain. The ranger walking beside the litter glances at the channel, then at you, then back. They are watching the water like it might leap, because sometimes it does. Not as a geyser, but as a sudden surge when pressure releases. The runoff is a river of leftovers, the surface waste stream of a deeper furnace. It looks like something you could step over, and that is the cruelty. It is not grand like a volcano cone. It is domestic. A stream, a puddle, a thin sheet, things your brain categorizes as manageable. Your brain did that earlier, and you paid for it. The litter reaches the edge of the basin where soil turns darker and pine needles begin. The temperature drops noticeably and the steam thins. The air smells more like wet forest and less like cooked stone. It feels like leaving a loud room, your ears still ringing. A utility vehicle waits farther down the path, lights flashing softly through rain. The team pauses to adjust grip and footing before the transition. Transitions are where accidents happen, and they are not interested in adding one. They lift and carry you off the boardwalk onto firmer ground, where gravel crunches. Crunching gravel is a sound you never thought would be comforting. It is the sound of stable geology, or at least geology that is not actively boiling. The vehicle doors open, and a paramedic steps out with more equipment. They speak briefly with the ranger team, exchanging information like trading cards, burn severity, time of injury, possible gas exposure, route hazards. Route hazards are included, like they are part of your medical chart. Here they are. You are loaded into the vehicle carefully, litter sliding onto a mount. The roof makes the rain louder, a steady drumming that fills your head. Inside, the air is warmer but not humid, and it feels like relief. The paramedic checks your blood pressure, then your toes again, then your pupils. They ask if you have any allergies, any conditions when you last ate. You answer, and your voice sounds far away to you, like it belongs to another person. Shock does that. It makes your own story feel like a report you are reading. As the vehicle starts moving, you feel a small jolt through the litter mount. Pain responds immediately, but then settles back into a deep pulse. The paramedic gives you something for pain, not enough to sedate you, just enough to blunt the edge. The edge has been sawing at you for hours. The relief is subtle, like turning down a bright light. Outside the window, Yellowstone passes in blurred greens and grays. Pines, wet trunks, patches of steam still rising between trees like ghosts that forgot to leave. You realize how close the basin is to the forest, how abruptly it transitions. One moment you are on dead white crust, the next you are in living needles and soil. That boundary is drawn by heat. Heat that thins out underground in some places and punches to the surface in others. A geothermal system is not evenly distributed like a radiator. It is concentrated, channeled, focused, like anger finding the same weak spot over and over. The paramedic tells you they will transport you to the clinic first, then likely onward to a larger hospital. Burns are deceptive, they say, because the surface can look less severe than the depth. They say swelling can compromise circulation, and that is time sensitive. You nod, and you stare at your boot, warped and stiff, still crusted with dried silica like frosting. It is a souvenir you did not want and cannot throw away yet. The vehicle slows, turning onto a paved road, and you feel the smoothness under tires. Smoothness is another strange comfort. The basin has no smoothness, only brittle or slick or wet. On pavement, the world feels more human, less ancient. And that is when the guilt arrives, late and heavy. You think about the Boardwalk sign that said "Stay on." You think about the choice you made to save time. You think about how the basin punished that choice without drama, just physics. Heat plus thin crust plus weight equals collapse. No malice, no warning siren, just a quiet equation. The paramedic watches your face and asks what you are thinking. You say, "It was so shallow." They nod, like they have heard that exact sentence before. Shallow is what gets people, they say. Deep pools scare you, so you respect them. Shallow sheets look like inconvenience, so you step in them. Then the water does what water does when it is near boiling. It transfers heat faster than air ever could. It cooks. Yellowstone is full of water that is not just hot, but efficient at being hot. Mineral-rich water can carry heat and hold it, and it can cling. Mud clings too. Mud is water with grip. That is what grabbed your boot, not just heat, but stickiness. The paramedic says the silica can set like plaster as it cools. You saw it stiffening your pant leg. Now, imagine that inside a boot, against skin. They say it without trying to scare you, and it still scares you. The clinic comes into view, a low building with emergency lights and wet steps. Rangers and staff meet the vehicle, and the routine begins again. Transfer, check, document, monitor. The world becomes fluorescent and clean, and your brain keeps trying to hear the hiss. It is not there, and that absence feels wrong. Inside, the smell changes from sulfur to disinfectant. The air is dry. The sounds are soft, controlled, human. Your boot is finally addressed with the seriousness it deserves. A clinician explains they will remove it carefully, possibly cutting it away, because pulling can tear tissue. They prepare warm, sterile saline for irrigation, not cold enough to shock tissue, but cool enough to stop residual heating. They talk about temperature like it is a dial, because in here, it is. In the basin, temperature was a predator. They cut the boot slow, layer by layer, and you feel pressure shift as the casing opens. It hurts, and then it hurts differently, and you grit your teeth and stare at ceiling tiles. Ceiling tiles are the least dramatic thing you have seen all day. That makes them precious. As the boot opens, a smell rises that is not sulfur. It is wet fabric and something organic, sharp and unpleasant. Burn smell is its own geography, and you do not want to learn it. They irrigate gently, washing away mineral grit and mud. Silica flakes off in little white crumbs, like dried salt. Your skin underneath is angry, pale in places, red in others, blistered and sloughing in a way that makes your stomach clench. The clinician does not flinch. They have seen this and worse. They explain the burn depth as they go, using calm words that do not match what you are seeing. Partial thickness, they say. Maybe deeper in some spots. They watch your toes for circulation and sensation. They ask you to wiggle, and you manage a small movement. It is weak, but it is there. Everyone in the room relaxes by a fraction. You are wrapped, dressed, elevated, and given more pain control. Time gets soft after that, not because you fall asleep, but because the day has done enough. You lie back and listen to rain against windows. The clinician leaves to make calls, arrange transport, coordinate with burn specialists. A ranger steps in briefly to take a statement and to note the hazard you described. They ask for the location again, the low saddle, the spreading sheet, the new plume. You give it and they write it down like a weather report. Because for Yellowstone, it is weather, hydrothermal weather. It changes by hour, not season. You ask quietly if anyone else will get hurt. The ranger pauses, then answers honestly. They say they will put up temporary closures if needed, reroute boardwalk access, post warnings. But they also say the ground can open somewhere else tomorrow. You cannot fence a whole caldera. You cannot boardwalk every crack. That is the part that sits in your chest heavier than the boot ever was. That even with rangers and signs and carefully engineered planks, the heat is still negotiating new exits. And it negotiates in silence. You lie on a clinic bed, wrapped and elevated, listening to rain like static. A nurse checks the dressing edge and watches for seepage and keeps your foot higher than your heart. Elevation is the boring kind of magic that keeps swelling from winning. They ask you to rate pain, and you give a number that feels imaginary. Pain in this setting becomes administrative. It is still real, but now it has paperwork. Outside the window, steam drifts between lodgepole trunks like a slow leak. You catch yourself staring at it as if you could see through trees and distance, as if you could watch the exact crack that opened under you. Still exhaling, a clinician returns and tells you transport is arranged. They say the words burn center and skin graft and infection risk in the same calm tone. Congratulations, you are now a case study in why water is a better weapon than fire. They explain that hot water keeps transferring heat until it is cooled. Air burns fast, then releases you. Water clings and keeps cooking. And mud makes it worse by holding contact. They mention that the mineral slurry can abrade skin too, like sandpaper soaked in heat. You nod, and your stomach turns because you remember the heavy slurp of your leg coming free. That was not just mud. That was the basin grabbing for more time. A ranger returns with a tablet and a map. They ask you to point, not precisely, just generally. You point to where you think the saddle was and where the new steam sheet drifted. The ranger marks it, then zooms out, and the screen shows how close it was to the boardwalk, closer than your memory wants to admit. They tell you they already dispatched a hydrothermal team to observe from the safe side. Observe, not fix. Yellowstone is not fixed, it is documented. Through the hallway window, you see a different ranger, wet jacket, boots, muddy, speaking to a supervisor. You cannot hear the words, but you see the posture. It is the posture of someone reporting that the ground is changing faster than schedules. A few hours later, an update arrives in fragments. The seep you crossed has widened slightly. The small plume you noticed is steadier now, a thin white column that does not care about rain. And one section of boardwalk near the saddle has been temporarily closed, not because it failed, but because it might. They moved the closure signs like chess pieces, trying to stay ahead. You picture tourists arriving tomorrow morning, coffee in hand, expecting scenery. They will find a detour and complain and take photos anyway. They will read a sign that says hazardous thermal area, and half of them will hear it as invitation. The paramedics come for you in the afternoon. They do not rush, because rushing creates mistakes, and mistakes stack. They transfer you onto a stretcher, check your bandage again, and secure your leg like it is fragile cargo. Because it is, in the ambulance, the world narrows to clean plastic, soft beeps, and the gentle sway of motion. The medic explains what they are watching for: swelling, circulation, fever, confusion. Confusion is the scary one because it means the body is losing its argument with stress. They ask you questions periodically: name, date, location. You answer, and each answer feels like pinning your mind to the bed. You keep thinking about how the shelf sounded when it failed. Not a dramatic snap, just that wet tearing sound, like the earth shrugging. There is a reason Yellowstone terrifies people who understand it. It does not need spectacle to be lethal. It can kill with a puddle and a thin cap of mineral. On the drive, you pass forest and wet meadows, and then, briefly, you see a valley where steam rises in scattered patches. Even from the road, it looks peaceful, like breath on a cold morning. The medic catches your gaze and says, "People forget this is a volcano, not the cone-shaped kind. The sprawled, collapsed kind, the kind that blew itself apart and never stopped being hot." They tell you the word caldera again and translate it without trying. A giant scar filled with magma deep down, heating groundwater like a kettle on a stove. The kettle whistles through cracks, and Yellowstone calls it a feature. At the burn center, the lights are brighter, and the language is even calmer. They unwrap your leg and assess what the clinic already suspected. Some areas will heal with care and time. Some areas might not. They photograph the burn, measure sensation with gentle taps, and check pulses with cool fingers. You are not a person for a while. You are a boundary line between damaged and viable tissue. They clean the wound again, removing any remaining grit that Yellowstone tried to leave inside you. They talk about bacteria and about how hot springs are not sterile, just hot. Some microbes love heat. Some microbes love your blood. A surgeon explains that the next day will decide a lot. They will watch how the tissue declares itself. What stays pink? What goes pale? What turns dark? Burns evolve, they say, because the damage can deepen after the initial insult. It is erosion, but in flesh. Slow, chemical, indifferent. That night, you do not sleep much. You drift in and out, and in the drifting, you keep feeling warmth under your soles. Your brain replays the basin in fragments: glossy patch, dull tap, colorless steam. In the quiet hours, you understand something you did not want to understand before. The boardwalk is not there to keep you from ruining the view. It is there because human judgment is not built for thin crust and invisible heat. We evolved to fear teeth and heights. We did not evolve to fear a surface that looks solid and is not. In the morning, a ranger calls. They keep it brief because you are not their only obligation. They tell you the area near the saddle is now fully roped off. They say a new outflow channel is carving itself into the low ground, shallow but hot, like the basin has chosen a new drainage line. They say the hydrothermal team measured higher temperatures in spots that were cooler last week. And they say, almost as an afterthought, that the new plume is still venting. Still venting means still connected. Still connected means pressure still has a path. You thank them because that is what you can do. After the call, you stare at the hospital ceiling and you picture the basin again, not as a tourist place, but as plumbing. Rainwater and snowmelt sinking into fractures, percolating down until it meets hot rock, heating, expanding, dissolving minerals, building pressure, then rising wherever it can, finding an old crack or making a new one, depositing silica as it cools. Silica builds terraces and shelves that look like architecture, but it is only residue, the mineral ash left behind by boiling water. And because it is residue, it does not care about load bearing. You realize that your boot did not fail you. Your assumption did. The assumption that the ground is a surface instead of a lid. A lid over a moving system that never stops trying to vent. Days later, when you are stable enough to think beyond pain schedules, a report comes through the ranger network. Not formal yet, but enough detail to make your skin crawl. The crack near your first flag is wider now. The runoff channel that cut off your route is still louder than it used to be. And the thin sheet at the saddle has become a more defined seep, still shallow, still easy to underestimate. It is not dramatic, which means it will tempt someone. The boardwalk detour might stay for weeks, or it might become permanent, or the basin might shift again next month and make the whole argument irrelevant. That is Yellowstone always editing. You lie back and you listen to the hospital air system hum. The hum is steady, engineered, obedient. It is everything the basin is not. In the long quiet, you start to feel the philosophical part settle in. Not the inspirational part, the uncomfortable part. You live on a planet that has never promised stability. You just built a life that assumes it. Yellowstone is honest about the arrangement. It shows you the heat and the steam and the smell and the thin crust. It even paints warnings in microbial color. And then it waits patiently for one moment of confidence, for one shortcut, one step off the planks, one little bargain with time, because deep time does not bargain back. The last image that stays with you is not your burn, or the clinic, or the ambulance lights. It is that new plume you saw from the boardwalk, small and steady in the rain, a quiet mouth in the earth, practicing, and somewhere beneath it,